This week we want to talk about probably my least favorite thing in fitness anyways is really long workouts.
Yeah. Yeah, why?
And by really long,
yeah.
I mean anything more than 5 reps. But in the CrossFit space, there's a lot of, I won't say issue, but we hear a lot of people get very comfortable with those like 30 and 40-minute workouts.
Yeah, but by the way, if we look at CrossFit as, hitting all energy systems, we need those, right? Mm-hmm. The problem is that I don't think that's exactly why people are choosing to do them every day, right? Because there's a lot of pacing. There's that idea that more is better.
Yeah.
I think that's why the 40-minute workouts, more than the need once in a while to challenge that particular energy system. I think you see most people wanting to do 40-minute workout because it allows them not to touch intensity.
Yeah. Well, the thing with intensity is just that it's fucking intense. You can't casually get into it.
Yeah. It challenges you on many levels.
And you really don't get to go away from it. I mean, I think in a long workout, if you stay below a certain percentage of output, you can almost turn off and just work.
Yeah, my problem with those workouts is I've seen many people do it in a mindless drone kind of way, where they just bang reps, and they can do that for 40 minutes because there's nothing behind it, there's no intent behind it. They just basically fuck off and feel pain for 40 minutes. But it's like, they do that at the Global Gym, who's on the bicycle for 60 minutes. Mm-hmm. And every time I want to ask, like, what is it? What is the intent? Because I'm sure, especially in Holland, we're all on bicycles, that you go harder on your bicycles to go home than you did at the gym. Yeah. So what is it you're doing here exactly? And I don't think they know anyway. But in a weird way, like those people just, doing this at the gym for an hour, which what we get in CrossFit for is to stop getting those just hour of lifting weights but not doing anything with it, with no progress after a while, right? We're starting to fall into the same thing with CrossFit, with those long workouts where you sweat a little bit because you're moving, mm-hmm. but outside of that, that's it. I mean,
it's almost like that's a comfortable way to get your reps in and get your work in.
I really think so.
Yeah.
I think that's what it became.
And so, but why is intensity important?
Right,
that's the thing, right? Like, because you can do a lot of reps, stay fairly comfortable. So why is dying in less than 2 minutes?
Yeah, exactly. Or even dying in 40. But the point is dying. So you don't have to do a 2-minute sled workout all the time and do just that to get intensity. Not me, but people have done Murph in a very hard way, mm-hmm. right? And died at minute 35. We saw enough people getting a heat stroke. I mean, because of the heat anyway. But there is the need to find intensity in a 40-minute workout too. It's like if you look at the guy who just did the marathon in 2:01 or 2:02, mm-hmm. like whatever insane number that is. Yeah. You're gonna run a marathon under 2 hours. What the fuck? It's my 10K. You think that's not intensity? Look how hard they push. So intensity is not always the 2 minute. The thing is pushing the pace for whatever length of the workout. Yeah. Right? So sometimes it's 2 minutes, sometimes it's 40, whatever. I'm for all energy systems. But it's pushing the intensity during that workout. Right? And you see that whenever people start to do those hero workouts every day, if the intent is to, I'm going to kill myself and I want to do it over a long period of time, okay. Yeah. There's some price to pay, usually muscle or joint on that one, but I understand that. But I don't think that's why people do it. I think a lot of time they do it so they don't have to go in a pain cave. Yeah.
Yeah, and well, that's the deal, right? It's the pain cave because it's super, super uncomfortable.
And why do we need it? Because we need the stress, right? And I think we need it more and more as society moves on, because look at society today. Like we have no need for shelter, right? We are never hot or cold, basically, always. We don't have to move that much. We never get into a physical fight. We never go hungry. So we have no need to do anything anymore outside of going to work. That's because you need money. Yeah. But we're living those weird lives where any stress is being removed more and more and more. And the more we push in society, the more people find new stress to complain about. Because I think deep ingrained is the need to go toward the sympathetic side. This is, the nervous system is not, we are 300,000 years old more or less as humans, but the nervous system is 300 million years old.
And we've said it before, but that is the nervous system itself is how we're interacting with everything around us.
It's reality.
Right.
It's what basically when they say perception creates reality on a biological perspective, it's the truest thing ever said, because your nervous system is how you interpret the world around you. It's not like you see it the way it is.
It's like that's the only thing that you know.
Yeah.
Is what you're being told.
It's what you're being told by your nervous system, which is part of you, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But that's why it's so easy to misinterpret text messages.
Yeah.
Because you can find in it about whatever you want. Mm-hmm. Why? Because you're missing the non-verbal communication. You're missing your nervous system reading the body, the expression of someone. So that's, for example, the vagus nerve. The ventral vagus nerve is one of its jobs is to check somebody's face for certain signs of either amicability or aggression. So that's usually here. Vagus nerve control those muscles right here, which will allow you to express emotions. Am I friendly or I'm about to attack? So literally, your nervous system's job is to define whether the world is a danger to you at that moment or not. And that's why, depending if you're pissed or in a good mood, you will read the same text messages completely differently. Yeah. So that's the thing, is perception creates reality on a biological level.
It's exactly why I despise text messaging. I do it all the time, but the amount of miscommunications that come across are insane. Like, it's...
that is not what I said at all.
It's not what I said.
Especially talking to your spouse or girlfriend or whatever.
I've literally read text messages from my wife in one tone where I'll read it and I'll just read it in a voice where she's going the same words, and then I'm like, this is bullshit.
Yeah, exactly. You know? Then you get pissed.
Whereas if you actually were just in a better mood and you read it in
oh, I love my wife.
Yeah, like that seems
that's
reasonable.
So nice.
Yeah. So that's but it is very interesting, like that, having the whole spectrum of inputs coming into you. From nonverbal communication, the words themselves, tone, all of that stuff creates the whole pack. I mean, that's where all the information is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I believe that's where the problem is. I think the most destructive thing in a way anybody have ever said was René Descartes, the French philosopher, when he said, "I think, therefore I am." Those were not the intent, but I think we transform that in a way to say that rational thoughts, spoken words, are the essence of a human being, right? And I believe that was the worst thing basically anybody could have either said or believed, because that is not true at all. If you look from that's because what we know now is we have evolutionary biology that explains us who a human being is. We start to go with intent that Schrödinger talked about, but then you move to the nervous system, which is a voice of its own, based on what the world is around you, perception of the world around you. Yeah. Then you have the gut flora that talks to you, that will also change your perception of the world around you based on diet and all that stuff. Yeah. And then you have those rational thoughts where you can start to make certain choices. But we assume that the rational thoughts, those words you talk to yourself about, like you phrase, are basically your true identity, your soul, basically. Where, no, it is not. It is those, especially in stressful situations, you can start to see that they are an extension of the nervous system. Not your thoughts, the words. Like we use words, we rely on words way too much. We think words are the truth, right? That makes us humans. Which actually, I believe that's what makes us the least human, in the sense of they are just an extension of the nervous system. I do not believe that's where humanity lives. It does not live in words. It lives in actions, in emotions and everything. Whereas I think, therefore I am, has turned this into words are the nature of humanity. Yeah. And I believe that was the most destructive thing ever, because I believe actually words are the least human things we have.
Easily. That's been a big eye-opener for me since being in Europe, where I'm around people who don't communicate the same language, or when we meet in the middle on English. And by meet in the middle, I mean they speak English, because I don't.
You don't speak German at all, so
I'm not doing very well at that yet. But I'll see people who actually are pretty proficient in English, especially as a second language, but you'll see those hang-ups on words. And there's just like, it's like, you know how words work. Sometimes there's one word is a combination of 5 words that come together perfectly. That's what this means. And this person who's really smart, knows multiple languages, can't communicate that point because their vocabulary doesn't include that one word.
And he makes, then first of all, he makes them look stupid,
Yeah,
which
it
is not the
barrier.
case exactly at all. But what he does is he forces you to understand their intent.
Yes.
And so now you're truly communicating, because now you had to make an effort.
I've had to change the way I talk to people
Based
only because I need to use things that make sense that aren't just English things. It has to actually be
so now you're making the effort of communication.
Yeah. I mean, minus learning the language.
Yeah.
But
I mean, you know, that's,
we're getting better.
Yeah. So that's the key, right? Yeah. How did all this come about? Because it's one of those things again. Man, I have a tag that keeps poking me. I bought that shirt just for you guys, just so you know. But so the idea was actually came a lot out of the Polyvagal Theory, which is a very big thing that was for me for the nervous system. But there's something that's been bothering me about it for a while now. So to explain the point, because I believe out of what I basically read and discovered to explain that hole that I saw in the Polyvagal Theory, a lot of very interesting stuff when it comes to movement and coaching started to come into the light. So first I need to back off a little bit to explain a little bit again the nervous system. So in about 1850, we come up with what is called the afferent and the efferent.
One starts with an A and one starts with an E.
Yes, with a French accent makes it even better.
Speaking of words that are the worst words.
I did not come up with them. I think his name was Bell, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And because it was the idea of proprioception, right? So the contact with everything else through nerves, basically, right? Proprioception. And so the idea was brain to muscle. So you have to understand, so 150 years ago, a bit more, it's not brain to muscle, because you can't just treat the brain as one thing. Mm-hmm. That's the thing too, is we understand now is the brain is not one thing. It's far more complex than that. But for the sake of argument, let me explain how he phrased it. The idea was anything that goes from the brain to the muscle, so an order being given, right? It's a lot like somatic versus autonomous nervous system. Anyway, brain to muscle is called the efferent nervous system. It's when you tell...
E?
With an E.
Okay.
It's when you tell the arm to move.
Okay.
Right. When the muscle tell the brain what's happening is that's called the afferent with an A.
Okay.
Part of the nerve. So it's the role of the afferent is to say, okay, we're moving a lot, okay, that we're moving too much, okay, we have to stop. Basically, so it's a checking out what's happening mechanism that we have to, that's what stops you from getting rhabdo every single time you train.
Yeah.
Right? We need a feedback loop, otherwise we just keep telling the body to do what we want.
That's where it communicates continually that discomfort that you feel like,
exactly.
Hey, checking in here.
So that discomfort is just that.
Yeah.
It's just the body asking a question. It's like, look, we are expending energy, we are causing damage. Is that what we want? As long as you say yes, you'll keep on going. Mm-hmm. Right? But so there are safety measures built in that starts to crank more and more and more as the danger becomes greater and greater and greater. It's just a safety mechanism. It's a feedback loop. Thank God we have it, right? But so now how does it work is a question. So a nerve, so the efferent, so with the E, brain to muscle happens in the ventral part of the nerve. The dorsal part of the nerve is muscle to brain. Right. So that's been established 19th century, and then we basically went from there. And here comes the polyvagal theory, which was done by Dr. Porges, the guy who invented HRV, right? That is so important. So he pushed the HRV all the way up to understanding exactly what the role of the vagus nerve is for the human body. And so the vagus nerve, like all nerve, has a ventral part, brain to muscle, and a muscle to brain, which is a dorsal part, right? And so from there, he started to explain what the ventral vagus nerve is for, right? The ventral part of the vagus nerve is for, and it's basically built for socialization. It's built to control the muscle of your face, right? To say, hey, I'm friendly or I'm dangerous or stuff like that. So it's something that was built around by mammals, right? To be able to live in tribes. Very important step in evolution. Yeah. And so it controls a number of things like your heart rate, first of all. So it's basically, in a way, the opposite of the fight and flight mechanism. You have the vagus nerve. It belongs in the parasympathetic side of things. So it's for socialization. That's where it's going to control digestion. It's going to control so many functions. They can Google it. On the other side of that, even though sometimes they work together, as we say many times, On the other side is the sympathetic side, right? So if we stay on the vagus nerve, the ventral part is to make you socialize and all that stuff. The dorsal part, polyvagal theory, basically they were explaining that's where depression lives. That's where antisocial behavior lives. And then they start to list a number of things that happen on the dorsal vagus nerve. And that was extremely important because it explained that that's where the freeze button lives, right? The least amount of energy being spent.
Yeah, with no socialization.
Where you go into a fetal position and you just stop moving. Why was it important to define it as a neurological state? Because, for example, it changed psychoanalysis forever. Because up to then, we had that sometime impression, at least some people, that when you go into a freeze, you're just being weak mentally. You're giving up on a fight. Where basically what it was proven, it was, no, that's not the case at all. It's just that once you go into a fight and you start to lose and you go into the flight mode, if you cannot escape the flight mode, if you're still losing, right, so the flight is not successful, then you'll go into freeze because you're playing dead. Playing dead is a very valid defense mechanism in certain situations. And it's something we inherited for ancestors, not 200 years ago, but millions of years ago, right, where playing dead was the way of defending yourself.
Yeah.
And so this is a button that we have, right, that the body will use to shut us off. And it's the least amount of energy being spent. So if you go completely insane in a workout, eventually your body will shut you off because it's like, okay, now it's dangerous. So we have to stop. So that's what that button is for. So it was an extremely important thing, the polyvagal theory still is, because it changed the way we look at the freeze button. It is not a weakness mentally. It is something that is necessary. All right. So that was very important. My only issue...
But is spending time in at that freeze state now is not desirable.
It does not feel good.
No.
This is the most damaging state.
Exactly. So though it's necessary...
Yeah, it's because that means you've done crazy shit.
Yeah.
Right? But staying in it is horrible. You'll stay in it normally just as long as you need. You have to understand the value of this button. It means you're basically close to death. Right? This is where it freezes you completely because or otherwise you would die. So it's a very, very undesirable state. Whenever your nervous system is in there, it's because he has no choice.
Okay.
Otherwise, he would not want to be there. It's extremely damaging on so many levels, right? Mentally and physically. So it's not a good state to be in at all. And the key is to get out of it as fast as possible, right? So my only problem with the vagal theory when I looked at that is they were listing everything on the dorsal side. Those are dysfunction. Those are all bad stuff, right? Yeah. And I was like, I cannot believe that the only thing that lives on the dorsal vagus nerve, on the afferent with the A part of the vagus nerve, is all negative stuff, dysfunctional things.
Because that's what depression is. Other than the protection point of it, like the life or death protection point of it, everything else that's about it is like a negative adaptation.
Yeah,
at that point.
Depression.
So it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, massive depression, completely antisocial behavior. I'm like, nature doesn't do good or bad. Nature does function. Everything has a function. If it doesn't have a function, it's being removed.
And as far as you see, there isn't much function in those states.
What's the function for depression? Exactly, or antisocial behavior.
Yeah,
I guess it's a driver. But you know, so there was a few things like that where I was like, but that maybe we're looking at it the wrong way. So maybe, there's a function there, and it's our interpretation of it that is mistaken. So the polyvagal theory is correct. It's been checked through heart rate variability and all that stuff is there. So I was like, so that's not wrong. But maybe our interpretation of it is shaped by the fact that the medical world only does dysfunctions. If you look in the medical world, there's only dysfunction that matters. Like I don't remember outside of Viagra, and that was not even invented for that, there's never anything in the medical world that is done for we're gonna make you better. Like look, whenever people start to talk about TRT, like testosterone replacement to make people better, everybody freaks out every time.
Yeah, it takes like almost a specialized fringe doctor willing to make.
Yeah, and you never talk about it, right? Yeah. So the only respect you get in the medical world is treating dysfunction. There's a very weird relationship between dysfunction and the Western medical world, right? Which is, it seems like it's almost the only thing we do, is establish dysfunction and treat them. So the problem with that is I think it feeds a part of the medical world that has a tendency to see dysfunction in things that are not necessarily dysfunctional. So I was like, all right, so there's something there that I don't understand. So I was like, all right, so first of all, it's the dorsal part of the nerve. So it's the afferent system. So the afferent system cannot be all negative because it's a basically feedback loop mechanism. So it's just a checking out what's happening mechanism. I was like, all right, so there's got to be a function to this. So then I started looking into it more. And I couldn't really find a way out of it until I got into what is called the test negative network, the default mode network. It's actually Casper who mentioned that to me. And then I started to look into it more deeply. So that's more toward neuroscience and not the evolutionary biology. Enfin, it's part of it, but that part is neuroscience. The idea was that the brain, certain part of the brain communicate. We know that through encephalograms to see the firing of synapses. And they communicate to do basically two things. One is the task positive network. The other one is the task negative network. And
these are, what are they basically? Are these?
They're basically thought patterns.
Okay.
That's what the more I looked into them, the more I realized that it seemed to me that we have the afferent and the efferent system, and those were translating into thought patterns, into the two networks.
Okay.
So the network of the brain, so certain part of the brain that get together to create something. So it seemed to me, the more I looked into it, that the afferent system, the dorsal part of nerve, so like especially in the case of the vagus nerve, was leading to a certain network in the brain, whereas the efferent, the action button, was leading to a different thought pattern network in the brain.
And when you say thought pattern, are you talking in the way like we described earlier, where these things almost appear in the way we traditionally think we think, like in words?
I believe so.
Yeah.
So I know that's a test negative, right? So I started to have my thing here and starting to place things together. And then it was very interesting. So test negative network, you can go on Wikipedia and check that out, and you'll see they list a number of things that we know the test negative network is for. How do we know? Because again, encephalograms making people think about certain things, and we saw how the connections happen. So we have the list over there, and we realized that the test negative network is where the sense of self is, right? Is where morals belong. We have where you think about the past, or when you start to imagine the future, when you try to figure out what somebody else is going to do. So your relationship with people, right? What are you thinking right now, all that stuff. So you start to read that. That's basically all part of the task negative network. You have when your mind wanders, you start to go like this and stuff like that, because you're basically going to another place. Usually you think about yourself or others when your mind wanders, right? It was seen to be as anytime there's a change in a peripheral stimuli, then you would go to there. So that means anytime there's something different around you that changes, maybe a color, you'll go there. So basically you're checking to see what is that. So clearly it's the afferent part of the nervous system. It's checking out
input.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's about input instead of output, right? It's so I wrote down every time because the list is so big. You had like it's a memories of self, it's social evaluation, it's story comprehension. It's all those very important parts. And then the change of peripheral stimuli was very important as well, where it allows you to see what's happening on the outside. So very quickly, I started to look at that, and that's where words belong, right? And I started to look at it, especially looking at the wheel, as a part of saying like, all this to me is, it's built, what is it built for, basically? So that was the thing. Yeah. What is the intent? I believe everything in life has intent.
Because this isn't going to appear over hundreds of thousands of years into billions and billions of people's for no reason. Yeah. Right?
So as usual, I was like, what is the intent? What is the purpose of creating a network? All right. So it's Freud who said the first man who threw insults instead of a rock created society, right? And I was, but it's we think of it as a bad thing, but that's actually it's a lot better to blast on the internet than it is to take a knife and start shooting.
Yeah.
So that's what society, as it evolved, basically got us to. If you look, it's the task negative network, right? So, because that's where your morals are built, that's where your sense of self is. So it's the afferent part of the nervous system. And
is that almost fully, then is almost everything on that side geared around self and socialization? I mean,
it's basically what is for, but what it also struck me on a lot of the stuff is, because we have to remember what the afferent is first. First of all, it was built, the nervous system was built to know if you're safe or unsafe. That's rule number one, right? That's what the feedback loop is there. If I'm safe, I can act. If I'm unsafe, I'm going to have to act to become safe again. So there's two kinds of behavior. You have the action you take when you're safe and the action you take when you're unsafe. The action you take when you're safe is socialization. The action you take when you're unsafe is fight and flight, It's basically, so a lot of the stuff, it's not a binary system because they interact, but it's really divided into safe and unsafe, if you look. You have the actions when you're safe, the actions when you're unsafe. They're not the same, right? That's where the part here is when you're safe. This is when you're unsafe. You're here, you socialize. When you're unsafe, you fight. Those are typical stuff. And then there's the bottom as well. It's like, all right, so what do you, I'm unsafe, but I'm losing. What do I do? And then basically here is also like, I'm basically unsafe in a cave. What do I do, right? So there was an entire connection there where it seemed to me that the task negative, what his job was whenever he feels he was unsafe within socialization, what should I do to make that safe? That's, so, you know, like a driver toward action. And if you look, if you're on a society level, not necessarily on an individual level, because evolution doesn't care. Evolution always plays a number. So if someone is unsafe in a group, right? But again, don't look at it from an individual perspective. Look at it from evolution's perspective, which is a large number of group. A large number of group is unsafe with each other in a group. What would you build? You'd build morals, right? You'd build a sense of self that allows them to basically stay within this. You start to create words, right, to allow them to communicate. And then so you had a certain, I could start to see the purpose of a task negative starting to be there. What does your mind wonder? So it's a change of, peripheral stimuli that difference. You start to go like this. That's to check if you're safe or unsafe, right? That's why something changed usually means unsafe. In a world, let's say 100,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, where the bush moves, you're unsafe. That means a predator is coming. So that's what the task negative is for, really, is to check if the world is safe or unsafe. And anytime something unsafe happens, it puts you back into the task negative network. So every time he was like, oh, okay, am I safe? No, okay. Then he would drive you to sympathetic, or yes, I'm safe, back to socialization or whatever it is that I'm trying to do. So the task negative, the default mode network, basically is a structure that your nervous system on the afferent side of the check-back loop will use to see if you are in a safe space or not. And yes or no will decide what the actions are being taken from there. Right? So it seems to me that the dorsal part of the vagus nerve is the afferent part, that's obvious, of the nervous system, and his job was to establish more than just depression or asocial behavior, that's just part of it. It was like, all right, we need to establish a base to create a society to live in, and I need to know if I'm safe or unsafe in that world. And that's what the dorsal part of the vagus nerve is. So if you get stuck, by the way, we know that's where depression is in the task negative network. That's been proven through encephalograms, because that means you're just stuck in the task negative network. So that means you use words all the time. Your mind wanders all the time. So you see, look at depressed people. They can't, can't do shit.
Same thought loops over,
and the same words that drive them further and further down, and the mind wanders. And what do? They always wonder about themselves and others. They're always like, what does he think about me? Like they're very almost paranoid in that sense of, they're not after me, but like, what do they think about me? They always ask you, so do you think I do this? Do you think I do that? This because they're stuck in a task negative network. So like everything else that nature does, if you don't follow its intent, you'll fall into dysfunction.
So not being aware of what those thoughts, feelings, whatever, not being aware what they're for is a lot of the reason people get stuck in those loops.
Exactly, because you, I mean, remember, this is where your sense of self is. So that means that every time,
because a lot of times we start to look at those states. People, you know, when, I mean, I'm not talking the extreme side of these things medically, but I mean just the average, the field that we're describing. We start to look at those states as a condition and not a symptom of something else. Yeah,
like that's just what you do, and but I don't think that's true. It just means that's what you do when the world isn't safe. When the world you're supposed to socialize in isn't. So when do you use words? You use words when you fail. Always, right? People keep saying, "Oh, it can lead you to action," because you failed already. Like there is when you know something and you do it well, you don't think, you just do it, right? When you truly want to do something, you don't think, you just do it, and you don't even think about it because you don't need words, because you're not in an unsafe place. So that means that anytime you use words, it's because the world is already unsafe, and now you're trying to recreate an environment where you can find safety again. But the second it's safe, you don't have to think anymore. So that's what words are for. Basically, it means you failed already. It's a task negative network thing. So that's why it's so easy with words to go into depression, because they challenge your sense of self. And once that is broken, you're going to have to rebuild it. And in the meantime, you fall into a pure task negative network. So once your sense of self is shattered by an event, rape or anything, you will fall into a full task negative network to rebuild all this, to find safety into your socialization again. And the problem is if you get stuck there, that's where depression is, you'll never come off. It's so hard to come off of it.
So that's, I mean...
And we use words to it, which is even worse.
And it's almost like the positives and the negatives are really of this network is really two sides of the same coin. I mean, like the negatives, it's like, yes, you can end up feeling depressed, poor self-talk, all these things, but that's the point. I mean, it's supposed to
There wouldn't be a society, the first man who threw insults over rocks created society. Without it, we would not survive.
I guess, and that's like you said earlier, your body doesn't do good or bad, it just does.
There's a function. Yeah. So the problem is, this is where society wants to drive you, because that's where society lives. Because without that, there'll be too much fighting, we could not survive. So if we let society decide where we're going, we will all end up stuck in that place. Because this is where, if everybody is depressed and just do the work, society thrives.
Yeah.
The problem is you suppress individuality. So that's why people always think society is almost built to suppress individuality. In a way.
Yeah. It kind of needs it.
Kind of needs it to be so to a certain degree. The problem is if you get stuck completely on the task negative, then you fall into depression. Because now you're not going to do shit. Because that's not where action lives. Action lives in a task positive. And so the problem is task negative in a lot of ways inaction based. Sense of self, morals and everything. It's basically all the stuff that is telling you not to do something. What are morals? That don't do that. Mm-hmm. It's not you're awesome human being for doing this. It's mostly don't do that.
Yeah.
Right? You're awesome for doing this. It's almost it's an emotion. You go help someone.
That's a feeling. You don't have words. Feeling. That's an interesting thing, right? You don't have words.
Define love. Yeah. There's no words.
Yeah.
Right? So the stuff that make you do things, love, hate, there's no words. It's a feeling you get. It's an emotion. Right? The words that you use means you're on a task negative network. You already failed. This is society and its needs are being put forward. And you see that through many, many cultures. So by definition, a society tries to suppress your individuality.
So what's on the other side of this?
So there's a lot of positive to it, right? Social evaluation is in there, story comprehension. So again, to be able to communicate with other people, you need the task negative. And by the way, anytime a task is done, this is where you're being thrown into as well. So you can see...
That makes sense, right? As soon as you're finished with the task.
With an action, you go right back. That's why it's called the default mode network, because you'll go right back to that. Because now it's time to see, you're done with the task. Why? Because the task is energy consuming and you can't just expend energy all the time. People have to understand, this is the reason we don't get rhabdo on the nervous system side. So it's about the same thing.
So it's not something to avoid necessarily forever. It's just something you have to be aware of its function.
You can't get stuck in it.
Yeah.
It's like everything else. You can't be stuck in parasympathetic, never go sympathetic. You can't be stuck in sympathetic all the time, never go parasympathetic. Everything is an arch. Everything is a balance, right? Yeah. But society drives you toward the task negative network, and this is where people are stuck. This is my problem when people get stuck with words. It's because when they answer me just with words, I know they're not going to do shit because inaction lives there. So the second you say something, it means you're trying not to act. Mm-hmm. If your first answer to me on something is like to explain what you think, that means you're explaining to me your beliefs. So the task negative is where beliefs live. So it's Nietzsche who said there are two types of people in this world, the one who wants to know and the one who wants to believe. Beliefs lives in a task negative network. The people I want to learn, it's action-based. That's where the task positive is. So whenever I have people using words to...
You're saying you don't learn anything by just standing in front of somebody and spouting your beliefs off at them?
Or when you tell me this is what the study says, no, you actually didn't learn shit. So, but this is where also when I know I challenge someone, I challenge their sense of self. Right? Is one of the first things.
And you can see where that comes from then when somebody
exactly.
Like if somebody's mode is immediately to start bringing up validation, you kind of know where they're coming from.
And they're coming with words, right? So instead of, oh, that's interesting, let's talk about the logical argument. Whenever people do not want to go into the logic of an argument, but first give me studies or stuff like that, they're expressing their belief system. That they believe is built on science and everything, but this, like everything else, there's so many studies saying...
Because there's two ways a conversation can go about things like that too. You know, if you talk about something, you come up and you say, Tyler, I found this, I think this or this. One way that can go is me saying, no shit, cool. So what you mean is...
Exactly.
And we start going,
let's learn from the conversation.
Let's go. The other thing is like, yeah, but I read.
You know, like
and
I remember, my coach said, one is you wanting, expressing an action, a desire to learn, right? Not to agree, by the way, to learn.
Just learn.
So one is expressing a desire to learn, the other one is expressing a belief.
Yeah.
When you're like, but that's not what I think. Yes, that's very true, but this is what the point, that's a very important thing to read, because we'll go into coaching. We'll go into how this applies. It's going to be a long podcast anyway. Yeah. Hang on. But this is where if you tell a workout and people start to say, oh, that's a bullshit workout or whatever, they got challenged. Almost, you have to look at it like their morals got challenged. Like you were having a conversation, a religious conversation or a political conversation, and you are challenging the sense of self of the person then, and that does not go well. The first thing they're going to do is come back with their beliefs, because you put them into a task negative network. So if you don't phrase the conversation correctly, instead of getting people to respond with a desire to learn, they're going to respond with a desire to give their beliefs.
Yeah.
And so who's at fault? So maybe in that case, it's me. Maybe the way I present things is in an aggressive way or whatever it is. I challenge people, their sense of self.
Exactly. So
their belief system instead of...
So even as coaches, as trying to communicate better, that's important that we're going to run into it no matter what, but you're going to have to avoid falling into the trap of saying something, having someone do something, and it being a place where it contradicts to their sense of self, to their the things that they think they know.
Or maybe you're an asshole to a person. It just does, with that person, it doesn't work. To some, you need to, because that will boost their desire to learn. But to others, you'll break them because you just touched, and then what they say, oh, he's not a good person.
Yeah.
Here comes the morals back in. The morals are there because their sense of self got touched. And why did its sense of self get touched? That's the real question. How did they approach a workout? How did you approach a workout? How did you approach them? That their sense of self got ruffled, right? And if you want to have a true conversation, you can't do that. So you might say, fuck all of that. Okay, but then you're not a coach. As a coach, your job is to get them into a task positive network so that they can try to learn. If your phrasing or your way of being leads to a task negative network, you lost already. Yeah. Because now it's a belief system that is being built.
Then you're never going to wrestle them into...
No, and again, this is where the world is unsafe. How the fuck do you want people to push when the world is unsafe? So we'll talk about this at the end for the application, so I can explain what the task positive is. But this is where the problem is when you see pacing and stuff like that, which we're going to get into, is just if the world is unsafe, your mind starts to wander. So you see those people, they do hard for 10 minutes and then they start to go, like the squirrel, or shit like that. That's from Up. People, I have a daughter, so I watch Pixar. I'm a liar like them too. But it's the whole squirrel thing. So that's where it comes from. It's because now the world is not safe. Because pain started to set in. And so, but the question is not, oh, the world is safe. No, it doesn't work like that. The nervous system is telling you the world is unsafe. Okay, now what? That's where the secret is. So before we can go into that, let's go into the other side of the task positive network is when we go into the efferent with an E, which is, I want to do this.
That's you communicating to your body this shit's
even though that's not
necessarily,
you know what I mean? No. That's how they phrased it back then. I disagree because I think the body is a communication.
This is just us making a thing happen.
Exactly. So I want to do this, right? Yeah. So the task positive network, that's where learning is. You can only learn when you're safe, you'll notice, right? Because you have to be uncomfortable to learn. You can only be uncomfortable if you're safe. So that brings actually a very interesting point about the fact that safe is the opposite of comfortable then. That means when you want to be comfortable, it's a driver. That means you're in a task negative network. That means if we look at a dysfunctional perspective, that means you're depressed. Comfort. You're seeking comfort, that means you're depressed. Yeah. Depressed not in a clinical sense. Depressed is you're in the afferent with a part of the vagus nerve.
Look at how many dysfunctional human behaviors fall under that category of seeking discomfort or seeking comfort. But that's all of them: food, drugs,
exactly,
alcohol,
and all that
sex,
stuff. That's all in a task negative network. Where basically, if you look task negative, this is where the memories of self are. This is where you think about yourself. drug addicts. They fucking only think about themselves. The drug make them is a lot part of that, but that's because the drug drives you in a task negative network, which of course puts you into that mode, and then it's a feedback loop that when you never get out, and you're fucking depressed and you hate yourself after a while. So at first the drug makes you do stuff, and before you know it, they drive you.
I'm gonna buy a fucking boat.
Yeah, like, and then I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna do that, and before you know it, you're being driven.
You're in the reality of it.
Because you're being driven, because the world eventually becomes unsafe when the drug starts to damage yourself to that degree. The world becomes unsafe. Your nervous system crashes, and once it crashes, you're in task negative network, and now you got a list of shit that happens, right? And that's the danger of it, right? So he introduced the idea that comfort and safe are the opposite things, and that's such an important concept, because comfort means you're unsafe. So when you look for comfort, you have to understand you're in a dangerous situation that you feel it might not be really dangerous, but it doesn't matter. Your perception of it is that it is. So whenever you're like, oh, I want to be comfortable today, it's like, what happened? So even when I read those signals in myself, like, I want to stay home today, I was like, why?
Exactly, yeah.
Who challenged you? Like, usually it's a woman for me. But anyway, that's a longer conversation, and I'm not going to go into it. But I did. Oh, by the way, just so you all know, if you listen to the Sisu podcast, right? The girl said yes for coffee, so there you go. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go watch the Sisu podcast. It's a good one.
Scott's Sisu Way.
The Sisu Way
on Instagram. Scott McGee.
It's Scott McGee, but find the Sisu Way on Apple and iTunes. That was my most personal podcast ever, I think.
For sure.
Yeah, it was cool. I liked it.
So you have now you got an international coffee date on the hook.
She's so pretty, Jesus Christ. Anyway, well, fuck, where was I? Oh yeah, right. So comfort is the opposite of safe. It's an extremely important concept. Most people think they're looking for safety, where actually they're looking for comfort. So that means that you're already unsafe. That means you got challenged. The key is not to go find comfort. The key is to understand, why did you get challenged, and does that really mean you're unsafe? Because many times that's not true. It's just you have to understand that the task negative network, a lot of it is a question being asked. Right? We're going to go into this when we go to our intensity. It's the body saying, are we sure? Are we doing this? It's not a, we should do that or we should not do that. It's, are we doing it? Yes or no? You answer yes, let's do this. But you're not being challenged in that sense by your nervous system. It's a question that is being asked. That means that someone challenge your sense of self, your sense of belief. So anything that passed in there, if they challenge words, if they challenge your moral, your sense of self, your change of stimuli, stuff like that, will basically, the question will pop up. And now the world is suddenly unsafe, or it can feel unsafe, but it's not that. It's just the nervous system going, are we sure about this? So can you please take a look?
To get from the task negative, I mean, I'm trying to, where do these two things sit in like the scope of experience? Like, are you, like, is it a matter of how I'm choosing to interpret a thing? Is there an action to be taken?
I mean, to a degree, so the combination of things. So first, task positive, what it is. Task positive is where learning is, right? So now you're safe. Task positive is you're safe. You have that moment, you can learn because you can be uncomfortable, right? This is where you are when you live in the present, right? This is where, what did I put? Yeah, it's that. Unfortunately, there's very, very little studied. We're going back to dysfunction in the medical world. That fucking list on the task negative is we have
a laundry list of human dysfunction.
Yeah, it goes on and on and on and on, and then I have a list like I categorized that is about that long. Task positive, there's literally 2 lanes on Wikipedia, and trying to go after the rest is almost impossible. You know where I found my answers? In yoga and stuff like that. So there's a state in yoga, which of course, even though I looked it up this morning, I already forgot, that basically state that you can be truly in the present, like the very advanced yogis can be in a very specific state. Please, somebody figure it out for me. And they say like for 2-3 hours, they're in a state of complete presentness, like they're in the present fully. It's basically the motion that I talked about for ultra instinct. I told everybody, this is the shit, ultra instinct. It's called the mushin in Japan. See, didn't I tell you?
You know it.
I knew it, and I said I could make up a workout for it. You remember my words from months ago? See, I was right.
You're
I always know when I'm right. I always know when I'm right. See, I'm not stubborn. I know when I'm right. There's a difference. And I totally knew this was valid. It's based on the mushin in Japanese martial arts, which is a no-mindedness. All action. If you find it as when you're fighting a guy, you're not. So what do they say? Google mushin, M-U-S-H-I-N. Look on Wikipedia. And they explain that's basically when you're not trying to guess the opponent's next move. You just, there's no minus, you just go as he moves. What is guessing the opponent's next move? It's right there.
Yeah.
It's basically like a form of empathy in that sense of what is he trying to do. That's a task negative network. So Mushin is the opposite. It's the pure task positive network where there is no mind. What does it mean by no mind? It means no words. Remember The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise?
Yeah.
Right. Remember when he's getting his ass kicked and the guy comes, he says, too many minds. Too many minds. Mind the people looking. Mind the sword. Mind this. Too many minds. No mind. That's Mushin, right? What it means, too many words, too many thinking about yourself, too many thinking about others, too much task negative network. Task positive network is where Mushin live, where that yoga stuff is. This is where all martial arts talk about when you get to that no mind where you just are. You are, and when the guy makes a move, you react to that move. You don't guess, you just are. That's the Mushin. That's what the task positive network, and that's being in the present to the max, basically.
And that actually sounds like a skill in and of itself, like being able to observe and react to things that way. And like,
but we all been there to a degree. When the runner's high or those great workouts, we all been there, right?
Yeah.
And isn't that what we all look for in a workout?
Yeah.
You had 20 shitty workouts, but there was one playing pool. By the way, you can have 2 hours of a bad session. You make one good shot, and you're like, I'm back in.
Yep.
I'm good. Back in for the next 2 years.
Yeah.
Golf, anything we do. There was one session where you were just there. No words, you were just in the session and it felt awesome and you go like, I want to, and don't we all train just to get back to that space?
Yeah.
We don't want to snatch, you want that PR feeling. Nobody wants to put 5 kilos on their snatch truly. What they want is they want that, oh yeah, right? Don't we all remember that awesome movement where, and what did they say? I don't even remember it.
Yeah.
That perfect movement, you don't remember anything that you did because you were there.
Yeah.
Because remembering is, where does that belong? Past, right? Memories of self and everything. You have none because you were in a task positive network. So if you understand where that awesome feeling happens, that means you can control it. That means you can go back to it. That's the key. Things do not happen to us. It's basically, if we understand, we can put ourselves there. That's what the Japanese martial arts try to do. They try to create a way to go back to that feeling because that's where the best thing happens. That's a task positive network. There is no words, only feelings there.
So how do we, as
by the way, there is a downside. There is a downside to it. It's so much energy consuming.
Got you.
That's why even the greatest yogi can't be there 24/7 because who wouldn't want to be there? That's my goal in life, right? Except you can't do it. Me, if I have a choice, I'd be in task positive or in fight mode. That's it, because even in fight, I get that arch between the task positive, which is more the parasympathetic, right? And the sympathetic, and I'm on top of the arch right there, where I just act. I'm like this, and there is no words anymore in my world, and I just act. I love that. Unfortunately, it's impossible. You cannot maintain it. First of all, you will not live in society if you could.
Yeah.
Because then you say one word, and I'll beat the shit out of you. No, because then there is no world. It's like there's no sense of self. There's no sense of danger, by the way. Imagine how dangerous would that be if you could live like this 24/7. There'd be no sense of danger. It's like, I'm just going to act. But then you fight the fucking grizzly bear. Yes, and you die. Yeah. So on an individual level, Japanese, it's like, I'd much rather die. On an individual level, maybe. On a society level, it's horrible.
It's a problem, yeah.
It's a problem. You can do that in Japan where there's too many people on one island, but imagine if you did that on the human perspective, we'll all be dead. So if you were in that state of complete present-mindedness, first of all, you would never plan for the future. You would just be. Yeah, okay, so that's how do you can't build a society like this. So from evolution perspective, it's too energy consuming anyway. So we cannot stay there. But that's not the question, is not to stay there. The question is how we get there. And again, what happens the second your task is done? You go back to task negative network, right? So that means that motion, that task positive, can only be done for a task. So it's only going to be a very specific amount of time. And the second you're done, you go back to task negative network and the world starts to form, and then you're back to your sense of self and to all that stuff. So motion can only be achieved through action, for an action, for a task.
Yeah.
And that's the task positive network.
So I think the best way to relate, let's walk people through maybe how to kind of use the information.
Okay, well, I mean, we don't know exactly how to.
But I think let's do it in the capacity of like training
Yeah. So let's use what I just said for training, for example. The second a task is done, you fall into task negative networks. That means that the second a task is done, you go back to, is the world safe or unsafe? We go back to checking. And that means...
It might take you a few minutes.
Yeah, it might take you. No, but for example, like how many times did we see, it's usually women that do that, where they had that number in mind of 20 reps. Then 20 reps and they stop.
Yeah.
It's like, well, because I said, in my mind I said 20. And they always feel like I wish I would do more, but I had 20 in mind, and you can't go past that. The reason you can't go past that number is because the second a task is done, you fall into a task negative network where your mind is going to wander, and basically, where do you think intensity lives? Yeah. Intensity lives in a task positive network. In that intensity is uncomfortable, requires you to be safe. So the only place where you can find intensity is in a task positive network. That machine, all that stuff, right? The second your task is done in your mind, not the workout. But let's say you set yourself up for 20 reps, you've done 20 reps, you're going to feel a huge drop of energy because you're going from efferent to afferent. And basically on that side is you're supposed to use less energy. So the second you think task is done, 20 reps, then you're going to fall back into all this where the world is unsafe, the intensity is going to lower, you're going to start talking to yourself, why am I doing this? Why am I stopping? Why am I still talking to myself? I did say 20. And then squirrel, and all that stuff happens. It's because the task is done. So now your body, your nervous system is going to force you into a non-action. And that's the danger of setting a number for yourself. So from a pure coaching perspective, it would be extremely beneficial for athletes not to set the numbers beforehand. Because if you reach that number, then you're going to have a very hard time going past it, for example. It would be very important for coaches to understand that when people have a tendency to set numbers, they have to make sure you set too high and not too low. If they set too high and they fail, it might trigger the sense of self because they might be challenged, and then they might be right back into a depression mode. So that's the problem with setting numbers. Instead of setting intensity as a feeling, right? That's going to be the danger. That's why I like the sled, because there's a line. It's not how many reps, is you go there, you come back, and but now we go back to what we talked about, is why do people want to back off intensity? Because the second it starts to hurt, you might see the world at unsafe. Now that the world is unsafe, you have two ways. You can either go, no, that is not true, the world is safe, I want more of it, put yourself back in task positive. Or you can go the other way, which is not understanding why you start to go like this, and why the sense of self is being challenged. Because how many times did you push on the sled and certain questions about yourself started to pop up? We all had that moment where you're like, where you have to face a very difficult question, which is, why am I here? Why am I doing this? I have no reason to push the sled, which is true because there's no bear chasing you. So why am I doing this again?
And sometimes that's right before. I mean, I remember when I first started doing like CrossFit in general. So obviously everything was fucking hard, and everything was intense. You know what I mean? If I walked upstairs, it was pretty intense for me at that point.
350,
So when I got, but I remember this after a couple 3 months. I remember started noticing, like, before a workout would start, I remember they'd be 3, 2, and in my head almost every time it would be this shitty little voice, like
you're gonna die.
Like, are you really gonna fucking do this? You know what I mean? Like how long do you plan on doing this? You're gonna do this today, and then you're gonna do it again tomorrow. Like, are you this guy that's gonna do this all the time? And that was for real what would come up in my head. And then once things were going, and I just made the decision to just do and just avoid that all, then everything was fine. As I got further away from that type of training and more into the like heavy lifting, when I would start to have trouble, and especially lately, from about April to now, I'm just having some trouble, some injuries, losing some weight. So all of it, I don't feel terribly strong like I used to. So my reaction to these questions, and like you said, these are just questions.
So that's the most important part. Those are questions, not orders. It is not your nervous system telling you not to do it. It's just asking, dude, it seems the world is less safe. Are we doing this?
And sometimes I at least fall into the trap of taking that question
as an order.
Like, fuck, you know what I mean?
I won't do it.
I guess, and I would run into it, especially post-injury.
Because the world is very unsafe.
I'd unrack the bar, and immediately things felt heavy, and the first question is like, dude, are you gonna be the guy that squats this much forever? Like, are you gonna do this? Why do you need to do this? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Or you used to be able to lift this much. So it's all this identity stuff. starts to roll into.
So I don't think there's self-doubts in that sense of the way people shape it. I think they're just questions.
Yeah.
But just they hit you hard.
Yeah, because
it's like, why am I asking this?
Because I think that's the moment that's do or die. You're either deciding which. That's it.
Yeah, right.
So that's why I think those things come up, and they come up intensely, and people don't know how to cope.
Because they don't know how to cope, because they're looking at it the wrong way. I think if they are looking at it as a simple question is, are we safe? If you could answer that, but not with words, with a feeling of, yes, we are, because we really want to do this. So that's why I think the why at the end matters so much, like the Michael Mann, because anytime the world got unsafe, he was like, yeah, but I'm going to be around when my son is 40. We're good.
Yeah.
The world is safe again, right?
Yeah.
But that was a feeling. That was not a word. Like I need to, no, it's not like an order you give yourself. That's why when people try to motivate themselves with words, it might work once or twice. But in the long run, if you don't have that deep why, that feeling, then you'll never go anywhere. Because again, words don't exist in the task positive, right? So what the nervous system is really asking is like, are we safe? And you have to find an answer, not in words, but within yourself. Right? And so when you're like under 600 pounds, it's like, yeah, but is that who I want to be?
Yeah.
That's a real question. And that question is not answered in words.
No, like, you know, when that pops in and it's like, fuck, dude.
And it pops in, by the way.
Am I gonna?
It pops in for everybody.
Yeah. You're like, am I gonna do this? Like now I got how far do I have to take this? Those are, you know what I mean? Those things
no one
come
is
up
watching
all the time. Yeah. No
one will know if I squat it or not.
Yeah.
Again, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Like, what does that mean? And many times the question is, what does that mean for me as a human being? Do I need this to be a better human being?
Yeah.
Of course you do.
And of course,
squatting heavier.
Well, and for me, it was a thing too, where it becomes almost this identity crisis. Because
but that's exactly what it is.
For real, within training, is things would come up where you'd be going and just like you said, it's like, fuck. How far do I want to take this? Like,
but it is.
Do I got to keep doing this all the time? Like fuck. Or if it doesn't go well, or if you take that negative.
So what did we do? Okay, so it doesn't go well. You just squatted 600 pounds, which is tremendous amount of energy spent that may be damaging. And then the question, how comes? Why am I doing that? Because you did not go well, you did not feel well.
Then you're
that hurts.
And then in my line of work, as a coach and a big guy and doing this, the thoughts start coming. You're like, am I a fucking fraud? How come I unrack the bar and I feel like I just don't want to do it?
So your sense of self gets challenged. And if he gets challenged to the point where, so again, it's a question, not an order. But if you were to answer the question the wrong way, you would be stuck into a further less safe world, and that puts you into a depression mode. A depression mode means the world is extremely unsafe, so you're rebuilding who you are.
Yeah.
But the problem is you don't get out of it with words. So that's why those workouts can be so damaging to your sense of identity, because literally your sense of self got challenged. So imagine the importance then of at that moment going, yes, I am safe, and yes, I want to do this. So yes, it requires you to have a why. But if you get up to squatting 600 pounds, usually it means you wanted it for something in the first place, right?
Yeah.
So you're gonna have to go back or don't squat 600. But if you want to squat at 600, then you're gonna have to because that moment is gonna pop up. It's like, why am I doing that? You need an answer because you need the world to be safe. And that answer again is not in words, it's a feeling, and you need that answer.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And so, as a coach now, right? So I've told that story from my perspective a few times, but as a coach, if you're coaching an athlete, and let's get to the intensity in a something maybe traditional, let's just call a basic short 5-minute or less, just a nasty workout or a sled sprint. But I think a workout's probably more relatable to normal people.
Yes.
Not everybody's able to die on a sled.
Well,
they're just not willing to.
They're just wrong. But yeah.
As a coach, how do you spot this stuff? How do you?
Right. So, for example, just by reading the list, you know exactly when people are falling into unsafe category, right? Their mind wanders.
Yeah.
You see it all the time. You are an athlete, like he's doing that, and then suddenly he starts to do this. He starts to look around. When people turn away from the bar. Look at what they do. They go there, and then they look at all over the place, back and forth, and all that stuff. Why would you just look left and right? Because you just fell into a task negative network. I think reading body signs like that would make it so easy. You can see the glazed eyes or stuff like that. That means, what do you think that comes from? It means they're inside. Yeah. Memories of self. So they're thinking about others or themselves. They're talking to themselves. You see that too. So when they start to talk to themselves, to to have their mind wanders and to look around like this, not knowing where they are. All that stuff
Or
are
they
people
just
looking at me,
start
social
using
evaluation.
Words, asking questions they know the answer
Exactly.
to.
Those are
What's-
all signs they're in a test
What's
negative.
a power clean again? And
Yeah.
It's like you've been here for 3 years.
It's like, so what was the reps on the second set? 21:59, dude.
Yeah.
You've done CrossFit.
Quit stalling.
Yes, exactly. Right, so what is that? So all those signs mean
That's true.
they
Even,
fell into a test negative
yeah,
network.
and even something like that, like stalling, trying to delay it, is almost a let's just wait till this feels safe again.
I've done that
almost.
so many times in boxing. You know, you're hitting, it starts to hurt. You go, coach. It's like, and he talks to you, and you go like, yes. Bullshit.
That's
you
my-
can keep boxing when the guy talks to you.
It's my favorite one-on-one. If you're ever a one-on-one, if you're paying for a one-on-one with a trainer or a coach, talking is the best way to get a rest.
Yes. But you know, like you're saying, okay, so pay attention to your form, and you see the athletes going, yes. Oh, they switched off. If they're learning, they go, haha, sure. They barely talk. They're like listening to you, but not responding. The second they go, yes, they backed off.
Yeah, which is interesting, right? So if you're a coach and your athletes are literally finishing a lift, finishing a movement, and always looking over to you for approval,
and
which is going to relate
it's
right back to
switching
that
off.
sense of self. They're already
So
they're already
they need,
at least far away from the potential for intensity.
and what do they need? They need words. That approval means, can you tell me I'm doing good, coach? That's a task negative network.
What do they need to get out of that
So
from us as a coach?
they need the world to be safe, right? This is the only way for them to go in a place where they'll be willing to be uncomfortable. They need the world to be safe. So the question is, why is that workout unsafe to them? So is it because they can't deal with intensity? Is that because its sense of self got challenged then? All right, if it's a sense of self, that's something they're gonna have to work on through their why or all that stuff on that side. But there's also the movement perspective now.
Yeah.
Is the workout unsafe because they don't have the correct muscle? They have so many imbalances in their muscle structure and everything that they cannot do the movement properly. They get fatigued, right? They switch from internal torque to sympathetic state, but they can feel the muscle starting to give. So now the world becomes unsafe. Do they have the mobility to do the movement correctly? If not, the world becomes unsafe. As you get tired, muscle get weaker, the mobility gets impacted. The world became unsafe. So is the world being unsafe? First of all, is the world truly unsafe? So, well, you reach a certain workout where you can't do snatches properly, or Isabel, you are rep 25, maybe the world actually is unsafe.
Yeah.
Because now that you don't have the mobility, you start to do that shit.
26 might end up in your spine.
Exactly, right? So now you are truly unsafe. So then it would be normal to have your mind, thank God, to have your mind wander and to go into that. And coach, are you sure? That's good because you were truly unsafe. So that the question is that first, were you truly unsafe? Are your imbalances taking so much out of you that now you're in a dangerous position, truly dangerous position? Then the task negative network has a positive effect on you in the sense that it's forcing you to ask your coach if you should continue or yourself, which is more important. Are you asking to stop because you are in a truly unsafe situation? Then it's all good. But then after that, you're not really unsafe, but you perceive the movement as unsafe. All right? So now why? What is it that you perceive as unsafe? Is that a mobility issue? Is that you don't know what you're doing? But that usually don't know what you're doing is still toward the task negative because you feel the eyes of other people on you. So what is it that you deem the workout unsafe, right? From a movement perspective, mobility issue or stuff like that, and then we can address that. So if at 26 you're about to receive the weight on your spine, then you should stop anyway, right? If you're at 26, there's 4 more reps and you start to have mobility issue, maybe the pec is giving up, all right, so that gives me the indication that I needed. That means now I need a pec that can take 30 reps and not 25. All right, so we can work on that.
So it's important at that point, like you don't need to take them further at that point. If that's the reason that they're...
If it's truly unsafe, stop. Yeah,
that's it,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah, that means they give you what they have, and forcing the last 4 reps make the world really unsafe. Or physically they could do it, but mentally they could not.
Yeah.
So that means they got challenged somewhere. Now the question is, where did they get challenged? How come they can't go past that point? So then you could have a conversation as a coach, not telling them that they suck, obviously, but going, look, you backed off. Can we talk about it? Why is it that you backed off from that intensity? You were trying to save yourself. Okay, but save yourself from what? Is it the movement you're afraid of? Maybe we can work on skill a bit more. Maybe we can build your confidence toward the movement, right? Maybe you need to learn more about the movement, which is task positive. So the easiest way to get safer in a movement that you're not comfortable, that you're not safe with, is for you to learn more about the movement. Learn more also means going heavier. If you get stronger at a movement, it's easier to do it at a lower weight, right?
Yeah.
And you'll be safer, therefore you'll be able to push more. So the key is always to try to get people back into the task positive network. And if that workout challenges you on the human level, right, if certain questions popped up, then that means we can use that to answer those questions. That means we're going to go back at that workout, and every single time the question is going to come up, and now I guess the question is, do you want to answer that question or not? But if you don't, that means you never go past that.
Yeah.
So to me, that means, imagine what we could do with that. We could create workout to ask people the right questions. So they ask themselves the right questions. So they challenge their sense of self through workouts, which is why I did jiu-jitsu. It's like, who are you? Like, you felt a certain way. I'll never let anybody making me feel like this again. Okay, then I went back to jiu-jitsu the next day to find my answer. Who am I? Why am I scared? Why am I unsafe? I don't want the world to be unsafe. So I'm going to learn jiu-jitsu. When did I lose jiu-jitsu? When I stopped answering that question. When did I lose strongman? When I stopped answering that question. My strongman for me was under 1,000-pound yoke, because the world was so unsafe. I was like, yeah, but I'm going to do it. And I've learned, so I put myself into task positive network, into more and more and more dangerous situations. When did I lose strongman? When it became about competition. Okay? Then it became about others, put me right back in task negative network. It wasn't about me anymore. I lost the task positive. Every single time I got in trouble, it's when I lost the task positive network.
Sometimes it's almost works the other way around though. Like you were talking with Richard, and I kind of the same. Is that now without any training target?
Yeah.
There's almost, it's like that question pops up, like, what the fuck are you doing this for? Like,
exactly.
You know, you can eat right and do a little bit of training and fucking be lean and strong enough. Like, you can still look fine and not work that hard.
And people will never know.
Yeah.
Right.
And
so now you have to redefine your identity. So your sense of self has to adjust to what is it that you want to do, or vice versa.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so so if you change what is it you want to do, you have to change your sense of self.
And that's a very common way for people to find a why that's a little bit further out than just this one workout. That's the reason competition works.
Exactly.
For a lot of
that's
people.
Why we all
they'll
love
get
them.
to a point, they'll stall out and they'll be like, all right, 4 months, you'll see a lot of CrossFitters, like 4 months, I'm going to try a weightlifting meet, or I'm going to try a powerlifting meet.
Because it makes them, because for 4 months, you're going to have to learn.
Yeah.
A new movement, being really precise. Yeah. And that puts you into task positive, where we are all addicted to. But then the competition goes away, and now you need a deeper why. And that's where it's so hard for some people to train hard without a competition ahead.
Yeah.
So like for me, like especially on the road, like for a year and a half, that's what it was. I was like, I have no reason to train. I'm like, yeah, whatever. Then finally, with a lot of stuff happening in the last 6 months, I was like, all right, I get it. So I'm back to challenging myself in the workouts, which I love, because that's where I always trained for anyway. Yeah. It was about me and everything else. So now I found it again where I was like, all right, let's see. Without words, it's a feeling, but it's let's see how far I can take this. Let's see how far I can push intensity. Let me challenge myself to the moment where those questions pop up, and let's see if I can answer them.
Is there any specific thing we could give people for, like, here's one example, get into it? Probably the sled is probably still your best bet to not have a skill run in the way.
Yeah, well, exactly, because we still have to, we have to be safe, right? So that's where the West concept comes in, weight bearing, eccentric, and skill. The sled being so low on the weight bearing, the eccentric, and the skill means you can push to almost any intensity safely, right? And so the key will be push a sled until as hard as you can until certain questions start to about yourself pop up, and then push it again and answer the questions.
Yeah.
But do it. You have to understand, like, to be in task positive network means learning. I mean, you cannot do any exercise without a reason to do the exercise. Not just for the exercise, not because your coach told you to, because there is a deep reason inside of you that needs that no mind state where you learn. And so that's not word-based, that's feeling-based. Go learn on the sled, go learn who you are.
The goal is really to get in there, get extremely uncomfortable. These questions come up.
And answer them.
And then you're going to have to
answer them.
And that may not come around for your first run. It may take you a week. It may take you a few.
May take you a year.
But at some point, you're going to keep looking these things in the face, and you're going to have an actual answer eventually.
And so that's why I think psychotherapy with words takes so long. because they're not addressing the issue from the right side of the equation. I believe the answer happened on the other side, on the task positive network. And so that's why it can take 15 years to get to certain issues, because words, until you're in your head, you go click, it doesn't work. So I think the click happens in action. So I think the sled will allow you to find who you are really fast.
I've never had a feeling as intense with words as you have when you just
with deep issues.
When you literally just dump that sled forward and find the ditch.
Anybody's done a workout high enough that they start bowling?
Yeah.
I think everybody, I've seen it many, many times. I've been there, where like after a hard jiu-jitsu workout in the car, I was driving back home with tears coming out of my face. I was like, I'm not crying. Why am I crying? I didn't even see that crying. I see that water coming off my eyes. I was like, what is happening? Like, it puts me in such a state of shock. But then I had to answer a lot of questions about what I thought pain was that moment. For 3 hours, I was like, I'm a pussy. Like, I backed off, like, I'm fine now. Like, I feel like I'm dying, and yet I'm fine. So there was a lot of self-defense mechanism that I had to break because I was lazy. I mean, I was French, what do you expect, right? I was lazy. I thought I was training hard until I was shown what actually pushing was. And the first few times, it challenged my sense of self, because like there was suddenly all the questions going like, whoa, 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 what was that? And basically, who are you? Because you always thought that you were that guy, and then they put you into all there, and you're not that tough, you're not that good and everything. Those were hard questions, but I think those questions are answered on the mat, answered on the sled, answered through the machine, through the task positive network. There is no answer in words.
So find a sled.
I think
if I had to give homework on the subject of this, that's the homework.
We're trying to make some workouts for that basically, but just don't take fitness as just a way to get six-pack. Take fitness as the best way we have for you to find yourself. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a mic drop.
There you go.
All right. So before we fully check out, we realized that we've been not doing good podcast stuff. Apparently, you're supposed to tell people where to find you on Instagram,
right?
All the other things, your website and all that stuff. So, listen, if you want to find it, Julian, you run the seminar, probably a couple of them every month.
Yep.
1 or 2 a month. Richard and you both do Coaches Week. Richard's handling most of them, most of it.
Most of the Coaches Week, of it
now. So those can.
I'm still there, but he does most of the work.
But those can all be found at strongfit.com. So there's a seminars tab there. There's a podcast tab. I think there's sandbags is in the equipment there. Is all on that same website.
You can find me on StrongFit1 on Instagram, and Tyler Stone.
It's Tyler Effin Stone. Tyler E-F-F Stone. So that's where you can find us on Instagram. Tell a friend about us, and have a good week. Tremendous.
Because I didn't know how long we were because the thing shut off.
It shut off? Yeah. Hour 13. So
there we go. Perfect.
All right, let's rock and roll, huh? We just need one person to check everything as soon as we sit down.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Just to make sure.
Oh, well. All right, well, this week...
Wait.
Oh, yeah, you have to pick one.
I know.
You can't have them both.
Exactly. Can't do that. That's going in the behind the scenes. The struggle of doing a podcast. Choosing correctly, the thing is.
That and the t-shirt selection is always...
I bought that one just for that, thank you.
This week we want to talk about probably my least favorite thing.